Good morning to all. Are you able to hear me? It's fantastic. Thank you, Haley. Appreciate that. Well, I'm very happy to see everybody here today. I thank you all for joining us, attending this webinar. Looks like we've got over 100 attendees today, so that's a fantastic turnout. We're really excited to be able to share this information with you about our new exams, which we've been working extremely hard on over the last few years, or last couple of years. And really excited to be able to push those out to the industry this year. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Um, Again, thank you for being here. For those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Thomas Healy. I am the Vice President of Water Professionals International. I have been with the organization for about 9 years now, and in that capacity, I oversee the exam development process, our volunteer leadership, business relationships between all of our clients, so our member programs in the States and in Canada, and through that capacity, just kind of see the business relationship of all of those pieces. So. Part of that is giving these presentations and getting all the information out to you folks, so you folks have the best resources available to you to administer your programs. So a couple of different things that I'd like to, before we get started, I would like to introduce Healy Van Ness, our Director of Certification and Programming. She's going to go through a couple of housekeeping items about how this webinar is going to work, how you can interact with myself and our other presenters, and go from there. So Healy, I'm going to turn it over to you for just a couple minutes. You can walk everybody through how this is going to work, and then we'll dive in, okay?
Great, thanks, Tom. Like Tom mentioned, I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping items before I toss it back to Tom and Isabelle.
Can't hear you, Healy, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Oh, maybe I can. Technical difficulties, I apologize.
All right, so just a few housekeeping items. This meeting will be recorded. It is currently recording. It will be made available after the event. It will go directly to the email that you registered with. Additionally, we will be posting it on YouTube, so that way we'll be able to share it again for widespread distribution as well. But once we click publish at the end of the meeting, you will get a copy of it in your inbox. Everybody's microphones and cameras will be disabled during this meeting. Please utilize the Q&A to ask any questions. We will take time for questions and make sure that Tom and Isabelle have adequate resources to be able to answer those questions. That's all I have, Tom. I'll toss it back to you and let you introduce Isabelle as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so very much, Healy. I appreciate that. So this webinar today it's a learning webinar designed to feature the new standardized examinations that we have developed. We're going to be looking at those exams, the updated need-to-know criteria, how we develop those exams, and what we're pushing out to the industry now. So the resources that you folks have available to you through the work that we're doing. We're also honored today to have Isabelle Gonthier with us. She is PSI's Chief Assessment Officer. She is going to give us an overview of the standard setting process that we utilize to develop these examinations, and scaled scoring, which is a methodology we've employed on the new exams that allows us to closely adhere to the psychometrically driven standard setting process. So really excited to be able to share that information with you folks today, and just push this information out. So really excited about that. So without further ado, let's get started on taking a look at the features of the new examinations and how we went about developing those. As Healy mentioned, we've got probably an hour to an hour and a half of content for you folks today. We'll walk through all of these pieces, and then at the end we'll have that Q&A session where you can put your questions into the Q&A side of things. Healy will help moderate that portion of it, and Isabelle and I are at your disposal to answer those questions. So very excited to be able to do this. So thank you. And thank you, Isabelle, for joining us. We truly appreciate your assistance and your expertise. So to give everybody some context on how these examinations are developed, we really want to ensure that that these well, everything that we do through the exam development process is rooted in the standards that you see here. So these are the professional standards for examination development administration. Everything that all of our exam development processes are rooted in these standards. So the educational and psychological testing, accreditation for certification programs, the International Standard 1704. Every process, every piece of the exam development process is documented and in line with these standards. And that is extremely important because we can stand back and say these examinations, because we go through all of these processes, and we're going to take a glimpse at how the examinations developed and the pieces that go into a professionally developed certification exam. We have to be able to stand on these processes because we come back to a legally defensible examination. That is the key component here, is that you can stand in front of your stakeholders and say, yes, all of these examinations were developed in line with professional credentials or professional standards. So we are ensuring that every step of the process that we go through is in line with these standards. We also employ professional psychometrician firms in PSI. So PSI is our not only our test administrator for examinations, but they are our partner in the psychometric side of things. So Isabelle and her team oversee the development of these certification exams. They provide several different test developers and psychometricians to guide us through the process, guide our advisory committees and our scheme committees through the process. So we're going to take a look at how take a glimpse of how these examinations are built and how they are in line with these standards. So everything that we do begins with advisory committees. So not just professional psychometricians and folks that are, develop these examinations for a living. We employ advisory committees, which are subject matter expert committees or scheme committees. These are volunteers in the industry. These folks are all certified. All of our scheme committee members are all certified operators in their respective jurisdictions at a very high level. Most of them have been in the industry for 25, 35 years. And have an enormous amount of expertise in each of their respective disciplines. So we bring everybody together at these scheme committees. We do a lot of different work, a lot of different pieces. So but the scheme committees are really the core folks that are developing these examinations. And to point out here, these are all volunteers with that are working in the industry actively. This is not a group of PhDs sitting in a room developing test questions. These are folks that are actively working in the industry. They receive specialized training on how to develop examinations, how to write good certification questions, or how to write those questions, ensuring that they understand how the construction of an item, how the stem has to look, how the distractors have to look, and it has to, and everything that we do has to be documented and have a benchmark. So really want to drive home the contributions of the subject matter experts and the volunteers that go through this process to develop these certification exams. Our committees are made up of individuals from across the United States and Canada. So we ensure we have good representation across all of our membership, from the East Coast to the West Coast, North America, and across North America. So really need to drive home the fact that these are volunteer committee members that are putting their time and giving up their time and giving their expertise to the process. So we work them hard. We bring them to we facilitate exam development meetings. So this exam development process started back in 2022 with a job analysis. So we brought our subject matter experts together in a 2022, I believe we were in Chicago or something like that, but developing the job analysis. So the job, what does the job analysis do for us? The job analysis is one of the most key components of the exam development process because it identifies what an operator does on a job or what a practitioner does on a particular job. In this instance, we're looking at water operators, wastewater operators, collection system operators, distribution system operators. Those are the key components or the key individuals and demographics that we're focusing on in our job analysis process. You can see here, these are and this is just a overview of the exam development process, just a snapshot of it. We begin with the job analysis, then we move into item writing, exam development, standard setting, administration, and school reporting. We'll look at each of those pieces, but I really want to hone in on the job analysis at the moment, so you have a better understanding of how we collect the data that drives the content on the examination. So why do we perform this job analysis? It identifies what the operator does on the job. It takes a look at a number of different pieces. So we've got our key demographic components, where your system is located, what's the largest pipe in the system, what's the population served on the system or through the plant, that kind of thing. How often or what jobs you do that are critical to the operation of a plant or a system and to public health. How are those job tasks significant? How often you do those job tasks? All of those pieces. So that's a huge survey that goes out to as many operators as we can get a hold of. So I think we sent this particular survey out to close to 40,000 individuals, or maybe even more than that. But we're really trying to get a comprehensive and aggregate look of what operators and water and wastewater operators are doing on their job on a day-to-day basis. And what that is, I mean, that's a fantastic and lofty goal in some instances, but to give you a snapshot of how, the expertise that undermines these examinations, that sits on these examinations is we've got over 20,000 responses or 20,000 operators that completed the job analysis surveys for these particular examinations. That's a lot of operational expertise underlying these, feeding these examinations. So really excited to be able to share that. To give you some context, the current standardized examinations that we are administering currently, those were developed in 2015, 2016, around that time. We had only about 5,000 to 6,000 respondents on that job analysis survey. So we've got, nearly 3 times that on this set of examinations. So that is, I'm just pleased to be able to share that so you folks understand that we've got so much industry feedback on these new exams that really drives the content. So respondents from across the United States and Canada represented 50 states and territories, 10 Canadian provinces and territories, and all of the results that we gleaned from the survey drives the content that sits on those 4 classes or those 4 disciplines here. So wastewater collection, wastewater treatment, water distribution, and water treatment. So what does this actually have to do with the exam? So we take the job of the operator, we distill it down into a survey to collect all the information about what operators are doing on the job. That survey drives the exam content outline and exam specifications. Those exam specifications drive the examination. So what you're looking at here, this is a job analysis, the exam blueprint. So this is the product of the job analysis itself. This is essentially a listing of all of the testable topics on the certification exam. It is segregated into different content areas. So we've got one here, you see treatment process is the first content area. Every sub task that you see in here, calculate and record, chemical levels and daily usage, chemical dosages, all of those are considered task items. And these are all testable tasks on the certification exam, through which it randomly samples. There's a number of items in each class that is determined by this exam blueprint in each of these content areas. So there is a very defined algorithm for how we develop these examinations, and it is all based on the exam blueprints. Now, these exam blueprints also inform the need to know criteria. That need to know criteria is the end user document that you folks are all familiar with. Essentially, it gives candidates a snapshot of what they're going to see on the certification exams. But I really wanted to highlight the exam development process and the job analysis process to, just to highlight the amount of operational expertise that goes into the examination development process. So with that, we're going to move on to updates to the need to know criteria and the new features that we have developed for the NTK, and then I'm going to turn it over to Isabelle to discuss the standard setting process and scale scoring. All right, so the new need to know features a number of different pieces. So what we've done is we've streamlined the content area outlines, updated those content areas. We have revamped the complexity levels in the examinations, and we'll take a look at what that looks like here in just a minute. The calculation items are all called out in the content area outline, which is nice per content area, and we'll take a look at how that looks. The big thing that I'm really excited about is the exam reference matrices. We'll have a snapshot of what that looks like, but I think this is going to be a feature that is going to be extremely helpful for candidates and content providers and curriculum developers alike. So very excited to be able to share that information with you. So updated content areas. So what in each of the need to know documents, so there's a need to know document for every single examination. Water treatment class 1 has its own need to know document. Wastewater treatment class 4 has its own need to know document. So there are 16 of those documents, one corresponding to each of the examinations. Just like the previous exams, we call out the number of questions in each of the content areas. You can see here this exam has 5 different content areas in treatments process, laboratory analysis, equipment operation and maintenance, source water characteristics. So each one of these content areas has a number of questions in it that was dictated by that exam content outline that we took a brief look at earlier. The other pieces that we have on this particular table is the cognitive format of the job task content, exam content. So what this does, if you see here, we've got the complexity level. So these little symbols right here on the side, we've got 10 at the recall complexity level, and there's an application complexity level, and there are 7 calculation items in each or in this first treatment process content area. So we'll take a look at what those complexity levels mean and some examples of what those items look like. But this gives a candidate a candidate or an operator an idea of how many items are going to be in each of the content areas and the complexity levels. Also, what is different with this one that we don't do on the current need to know criteria is we call out the number of calculations in each of the content areas instead of just giving an overall number of content area or calculation items on the exam. So you can really hone in, an operator can really hone in on understanding that if they if they are failing in the treatment process content area, they know that they need to focus on some mathematical processes because there are 7 of those calculation items, and that's a big chunk of the content area. So good information for candidates to have, and it's in line with best practice and precedent. So we're going to take a look at these complexity levels. So on the current examinations that we have out right now, there are 3 complexity levels. There's recall, application, and analysis. What we have done in these examinations is we've reduced it to 2 complexity levels in just recall and application. The analysis items that that existed on the current examinations were rolled into these two complexity levels. So there's only so we're only dealing with these two complexity levels. We don't have to mess with the third one. So the recall is this is the easiest complexity level, or easiest item. So tasks at this level typically recall, they typically need recall of simple facts, essentially. Concepts, processes, procedures. There's not any problem solving typically involved with this. It's just something that you know off the top of your head, or if you're familiar with the topic, you should know this. So although, I mean, you can take a look at this this particular item. You can see it's very basic, but gets at a core competency that is outlined on that need to know criteria and the exam blueprint. The next complexity level is application. So these items are going to involve some basic problem solving, some calculations. So all of the calculation items are going to fall within the application side of things. Or it does require some interpretation of an application of data. So these may be scenario questions that have multiple pieces of information that you have to piece together in order to solve the item, or in order to answer the item correctly. So you can take a look at what this application item looks like here. So it does require a little more adherence to the process and understanding of the process to piece this one together. So we also have job task lists. So much like the current examinations that we have, we do have a listing of all of the job tasks in each of the content areas outlined in the next section of the document. So this, this details all of the testable topics in each of those content areas. So candidates have a good idea of what they are looking at and what they can expect to see in each of those content areas. So questions on each one of these pieces. This is one that I'm extremely excited about, the exam references. So every item on a certification exam, every question, when I say item, I do mean just a single question on an exam, is referenced to an industry peer-reviewed publication. So we utilize publications from California State University Office of Water Programs, American Water Works Association, and Water Environment Federation. Every question has to be referenced to one of those manuals. And this time when we did exam development, we really tried to streamline the references that were utilized by the committees. So we don't dictate which reference material they utilize, only that they utilize it from this pool. So we really tried to stay with the flagship offerings from each of those, each of the content providers. So we are looking at AWWA's WSO series. We utilize that very heavily. The CSUS water treatment, CSUS books, the King Carey books, and also the WEF fundamental books. So really tried to streamline the amount of references we utilized, so operators don't have to go out and buy 50 different books in order to study for these examinations. But what this matrix does, and this exists in every single exam content or every single need to know criteria, this identifies the primary and secondary reference for each of the content areas on the examination. So what this does for candidates is when they receive their score report with the performance matrices in each of those content areas, they can look to see how well they performed in say the treatment process content area. The the score report will identify whether you were strong in that area or you're weak in that area. And the nice thing about this is they can say, oh, well, I didn't do well in the treatment process, so I need to go back and study. I need to go back and look at these two references. So this is the primary and secondary reference for every single content area, or every single content area. So this will be this allows candidates to cross-reference their performance indices on the score reports with the actual references that were utilized during the exam development process. So this is also very valuable to curriculum developers, trainers, that kind of thing, when you're developing your classes and that curriculum, to understand which manuals we're pulling from and we're developing these certification exams off of. So every single NTK is going to have one of these tables in it that identifies those references. So that is this was a process that was really kind of driven by a feature that was really kind of driven by industry feedback. So really trying to give candidates and trainers the best resources that we can, while still keeping, in line with best practice and ensuring that our test content is safeguarded. So, yeah, just a brief slide on the reference materials. Again, American Water Works Association, Water Environment Federation, California State University. Those are the three large ones that we're utilizing. The formula conversion tables that we have that accompany the certification exams, those have been updated. They've been reviewed by a small committee, a multidisciplinary committee that looks at all of the calculation, or the formula conversion formulas and conversions that are provided on this table, and those ensuring that those align with the examinations. There's not something on an exam that doesn't have a formula associated with it, those kind of pieces. So they are merged now with the metric and the US calculations. That's not a new thing. We did that with a previous edition of certification exams, but still providing both English and metric on one table for ease of use across all of our members. So we've checked for relevancy against the need to know criteria, and we've cross-referenced all the tables. So those are updated and coming with the new certification exams. So from here, I would like to turn it over to Isabelle and let her discuss the standard setting process that we went through. So standard setting is essentially determining a cut score for these examinations. In September of this last year, the Certification Commission for Environmental Professionals, which is the oversight body that is responsible for the development of the certification exam, the certification exams, voted on, to enact what we call something called scaled scoring with these examinations. And I'm going to let Isabelle talk about what scaled scoring is and how it is going to affect essentially how it affects how the examinations are scored in that standard setting. So Isabelle, I would like to turn it over to you for your bit, if you don't mind, and thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So it's great to see, from Tom's update, like all of the steps and everything that's been done in terms of the update and development of the examination. And if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to take a moment to just step back and to contextualize what I'm to talk about, which is the standard setting that Tom referenced. But looking at this, when you think about the psychometric principles around the development of a valid, reliable, and fair examination, there's multiple steps that have to be followed to meet those requirements. Tom talked about the process of the job analysis, which is critical in establishing what needs to be assessed, how it's going to be assessed. Everything is based on the outcome of the job task analysis. Exam questions are developed to line up with the outcomes of the job analysis. How we're doing standard setting, which is establishing what the standard is to determine competency adequate competency to be successful on the exam is based on the requirements defined by the job analysis. So all of this linked together, and it's really important as we think about it in the importance of making sure all of the steps of the assessment life cycle are following the best practice associated with that. And that's what WPI has done through the entirety of the process, and what we're doing and what we're working with here as we define how we establish a cut score or a passing score. So let's dive in. So getting to the next slide, when we talk about standard setting, what does that mean? It's basically answering the question around like who actually passes the test, who meets the minimal level of competence to be considered successful on that test and then to be able to earn the credential. So when we talk about standard, we refer to the minimum level of competence to perform a job safely and without supervision. So really important here to own into that concept of minimal level of competence. I know some people will cringe at that. It's like minimal competence. What does that mean? I want someone that's fully competent. Well, minimal level of competence is competence. But that's kind of what through the process you need to determine in terms of who meets the standard, who meets that level that is established. Where do we set that bar? And where that bar is set, that means that only those who meet those requirements of minimal competence should pass the exam. So it's really an important process in defining what is that minimal competence level. How do we do that? So we do that through a method that's called the Enghoff method. So first and foremost, through the Enghoff method, one of the most important element of the process is to actually define that minimally competent candidates. So looking at the requirements from the job analysis, looking at all of the task knowledge that are required for the specific examination, what defines who's minimally competent? Work with a panel of subject matter experts that have been selected and identified to go through that process to confirm what that definition is, first and foremost. Then using that definition throughout the process to determine, then the Enghoff method process is around the fact of identifying, taking the exam and identifying question by question, who, how much, how many, what's the percentage of the minimally competent candidates will answer the question correctly. So the process is kind of tedious in a way, but really important is that the subject matter experts that are defined as panelists or judges go through one question at a time, looking at the exam question and determining based on the definition of minimally competent, what's the percentage of the minimally competent candidates that will answer this question correctly. And then, you know, it's a bit of a process where some people might agree or disagree. So some people might say, oh, that's an easy question. 90% of the minimally competent candidates will answer this correctly. And someone else might say, oh, actually, the distractors are pretty good. And someone that's not kind of quite there might actually get tricked by the distractors. I think it's a hard question. So I think only 40% of the minimally competent candidates will answer this question correctly. So through the process, it's discussing and defining, okay, where is it at? Like for each of the questions. Sometimes there's going to be agreements between the judges. Sometimes there's going to be some disagreement. And then the important aspect of it is discussing it and see where do we meet? Because in the end, how then the cut score is set is based on the average of all of those ratings from all of the judges, and that will determine what is the cut score that is aligned with the standard of that minimally competent candidate. What's really important here is that this is a process that's based on the content of the examination, the level of difficulty, in line with that standard. So we're stepping away from that concept of a 50% score or a 60% score or a 70% score. This is very arbitrary. Here in that process and approach is determining what is the standard required for competence. So what does that mean for WPI? If we go to the next slide, really want to reinforce the fact that obviously, as we've discussed, all of the exams, everything that's being done with WPI, supported by our team of psychometricians, is that we align with the best practices, the psychometric best practices. What's at issue here is that historically, the passing score for the examination has been set at 70%. There's various reasons for that. There's some legislations and all of that. So that 70 mark is been established and has been used and leveraged. And the approach that we've been using is to build an exam to that cut score. And through collecting the NGOF ratings, like I discussed, and really building an examination that meet that 70 cut score. It's not always possible to do that because sometimes there's variation in the examination. There's variation in the questions that are selected because remember, the exam needs to meet the blueprint parameters, going back to the job analysis and the blueprint process. So there's many elements that have to be considered in building a reliable, valid, and fair examination. The content coverage, the statistical performance, all of these elements are critical in building those exam forms. And it's not always possible to build an exam to a predetermined cut of 70. So the idea here is to leverage the outcomes of the NGOF, build the examination to the standard, and then establish understanding what the cut is according to the process. So it could be 68, 69, 71, 72, again, based on the process that is being followed to ensure that every single examination is in the end equivalent and link back to that standard of competence. So how do we then address that need of a 70 that everybody knows, everybody understands? Then that's where the concept of scale scoring comes into play, is that we scale everything to a 70. So first, let's talk about what do we mean by raw scores and scaled scores. So raw scores is what, everybody's used to, is identifying out of 100 questions, exam questions, how many of those questions were answered correctly. So for a test with 100 questions, the raw score covers the range from 0 to 100. And it would be if you got 68 questions correct, that's 68%. So the idea here, as I said, is that we need to make sure that we're setting the cut to that minimal level of competence. So it could be a 69, it could be a 71, but the idea then is that from a scaling standpoint, we're bringing everything to the same scale. So that cut is 70, a scaled score of 70. It doesn't matter how many items you have on the exam. It doesn't matter of the level of difficulty. All of this in the end is being considered and taken into consideration through what we called an equating process. And then everything is the same. Even if the exam changes in terms of level of difficulty, the standard is always the same. In the end, the way the score are reported is always the same, always on the same scale. So it doesn't create questions that, why did I need 68 on this exam versus 71 on this exam? That's not the point of the matter. The point of the matter is that that standard always remains consistent. And the best way to illustrate that is by converting the raw scores to a scaled score. In your situation here, one of the challenges is that you have you're talking about the same scale in a way. You have like a 0 to 100 from a raw score standpoint because your exams are 100 questions. And then we're scaling everything to a 0 to 99 basically is the scaled score. So it's probably easier to explain because in the end, people are going to see, okay, it's 70. A scaled score of 70 means a cut score of 70 that is scaled from the original raw score. So going to the next slide, why was scaled scored? Well, as I've mentioned before, it's kind of the opportunity to ensure that we're still applying the cut score that aligns with that minimal level of competence, we're still looking at building exams that are around that cut score. Don't get me wrong, this is still critical, but it allows for that flexibility of ensuring we're meeting all of the parameters. So what the benefits of the scale scored are: it simplifies score interpretation, it's consistency of the cut score across all of the exams and across all of the exam forms. Even the level of difficulty might fluctuate. In the end, it's all the same. And in the end is that by leveraging this, we are taking the important outcomes from the Enghoff method to really apply the cut score that is based on that standard of competence. That's the critical element. And then the next slide kind of like shows a little bit of that representation. It's on a different scale, but the idea here is that everything is scaled to the same scale. And probably an example of that I can use is that if you think of the concept of temperature, the temperature is always the same, like it doesn't matter, but you can illustrate that in Celsius, you can illustrate that in Fahrenheit. So there's different scales to illustrate one same concept. Here, the concept that we're illustrating is that minimal level of competence. What is that scaled cut score that is required to be successful, and everything is represented on that same scale. What does that mean in terms of what's reported to the test takers? On the next slide, you'll see that updated score reports, and I'll turn it back to Tom in a minute here so he can expand a little bit more on that as required. But the idea here is that we're still providing the same type of information, actually enhanced information to the test takers to say, here's the scale score you got, here's how it relates to the scaled cut score, and here's how you performed across the various content areas. And then on this, it gives you a sense of from weaker to stronger. And it gives you a sense if, for instance, you failed the examination, you can see where you probably didn't perform as well, which areas that you might need to focus on in order to prepare for the next attempt. And I know you wanted to talk a little bit about exam review and implementation. Tom, I'll turn it over to you, and anything else you wanted to add on the score report.
Yeah, thank you, Isabelle. I very much appreciate that. It's important to note here that this methodology of implementing scaled scoring is, we're not doing it in a vacuum. This is this is a process and a procedure that is utilized across the testing industry, especially in vocational testing work. Most industries are utilizing scaled scoring to ensure that they are adhering to their standard settings. And it's a very documented, psychometric, and bulletproof process. So it's utilized not only in vocational examinations, but in academia as well. ACT, SAT, all of those examinations utilize scaled scoring. So it's something that aligns us with best practices in the industry while still adhering to that 70 mark that has been legislated for years and years and years in this industry. So you can see here what Isabelle was talking about, the updated score reports that are going to accompany these examinations. So you can see in each of the content areas, we give a bar graph of weaker performance or stronger performance in each of those content areas. We're not calling out specific, you got this many items correct, you got that in this content area, but we have that scale on there, which is a graphical or visual representation of performance in each of those content areas. So this gives candidates the information and the knowledge to go back to the need to know criteria, which and identify the appropriate references that they need to focus in on to perform better in each of those content areas. So still providing as much information as we can to candidates and to folks taking these examinations, but this gives us the flexibility not only to adhere to that psychometric development process, but it also will allow us in the future to release multiple versions of these examinations. So if we have right now, because the exam development process is such a lengthy one and expensive one, we release one form. We're releasing one form for each of these examinations. So meaning there is a single examination for wastewater treatment 1. There's a single examination for wastewater treatment 2. What this allows us to do in the future is develop multiple versions of those examinations that have, that are still in line with those exam blueprints, and do independent cut score studies on each of those forms. We're not just arbitrarily saying that this is a 70% pass rate. It allows us to, if we have a wastewater treat, say we take wastewater treatment 4, right? We have 2 different forms of those. They have different items that are still in line with that blueprint, but those items may not be performing at the same level across both of those forms. So, or at the same level on each of those forms. So what we can do is we can set individual cut scores on each of those examinations and scale it to 70. So the examination is fair and also reliable across exam forms. Is that an accurate explanation of that, Isabelle?
It is a great explanation. The most important element is the equivalency in this situation. So you've explained it well.
Very good, thank you. I appreciate that. So these are the updated score reports that we're going to be releasing with the examinations. Now, every client that we have that is, works with either any one of the modalities that we offer, whether it's paper-based testing, web-based testing, computer-based testing through PSI's network, they do receive score reports for every candidate. Now, this is these score reports are completely customizable for your program. They're still going to contain the same content area information and performance matrices on this, but anything below that content area descriptions there, we can modify and give instructions to candidates and all of those pieces. So every client has their own, but we'll work through this implementation process. If you decide to implement these new examinations, through the implementation process, we'll review all of the elements that are presented to candidates and the program alike to ensure that everything is up to date and all of that communication and language on the score reports is updated to ensure it's reflective of your processes. I want to talk a little bit about exam review and implementation. So our member programs, as as certifying authorities, are allowed to review the examinations before they're implemented in your program. To be just for context, WPI does not dictate any portion of this. You are welcome to utilize. You have the discretion in your program to utilize any examinations that you want, whether that be the current standardized examinations, the new standardized examinations that we are implementing right now, or a customized program. But WPI will never change the exams that your program is offering without direct consent and approval from the program. So we do want to offer exam reviews for our member programs. This is only available to certifying authorities. It's not available to training providers or anything like that. The actual certifying authority or primacy agency that is responsible for certification within their jurisdiction, they have the authority to review the examinations and approve them for use in their own jurisdiction. So we have several programs that are working on implementing these examinations right now, but you can indicate your intentions if you are a certifying authority and a program. You can indicate your intentions by following this SurveyMonkey link, and we'll make sure that this is sent out this has been sent out to all of our contacts, our certification program contacts, as of earlier this week. Many of you folks have already responded to initiating the review process. And so if you have not, you can follow this link. This just collects some demographic information about your program, your intentions on whether or not you want to review the examinations or you want to implement the examinations. And that kicks off that process. So you'll be working with staff here at WPI, mostly Emily Pouch. She is facilitating the full review process and implementation process with PSI. So all of those pieces will fit together once we have your intentions indicated through this survey. Implementation timelines are very dependent upon the modality that you choose. Web-based testing and paper-based testing for those programs that utilize those pieces. We can typically get those programs up and running in 2 to 4 weeks, depending on if there's anything we need to change as far as processes and those kind of pieces. Those two modalities are managed directly by WPI staff. So we've got a fairly quick turnaround time on implementation for those pieces. For computer-based testing and live remote proctoring, it does take PSI about 8 to 10 weeks to implement examinations in their network. So there's a significant amount of change that has to happen in multiple systems in their systems, and they do a significant amount of quality assurance checks and all of those pieces to ensure that the exams are going to be able to be provisioned correctly and launched correctly for candidates. So it does take about 8 to 10 weeks for them to do that entire switchover. However, implementation timelines are going to be determined, by your program's review schedule, and we typically just schedule the implementations to start on a particular date. So we will work with your program individually to ensure that you have all the information that you need to provide to your stakeholders. Whether that be the need to know criteria and information on what's changing on these examinations. And we typically will schedule the implementation for a specific date and time. So you can ensure that your candidates and your programs and your training providers have the updated information on the new need to know criteria, and that they have all of the resources they need to be successful on the certification exams. After the webinar, we will be, of course, if you did not receive the survey, please reach out to us and we can send you the survey, or it will be linked. It is linked in this this presentation, so you can find it through that as well. There are a couple of different documents that there's a review document that will indicate your intentions on which exams you want to review for your program, who's going to be reviewing them, and we will, and also there's an implementation guide to indicate programs' intentions to implement the examinations once they have been reviewed. You don't necessarily have to review the examinations, but it is an option that we have curated for your programs to ensure that you understand the content being administered. So with that, I would, also I wanted to touch on the availability, the need to know criteria. We send the need to know criteria out to all participants on this webinar. They are not currently posted on our website because a lot of candidates go to our website to retrieve need to know criteria for the current examinations that are being administered. We don't want to confuse them at this time, so we have firewalled the new need to know criteria for those programs who indicate their interest in it, and we will send that need to know criteria out to you folks. But until such a time that the examinations are being widely implemented by programs, then we will ensure that everything is up on our website and available to candidates and programs alike. So with that, I would like to open it up for questions. That's about what I've got at the moment. We've done a lot. We've given you a lot of information, so I would like the opportunity to answer your questions, both myself and Isabelle and Healy, answer your questions on what you have, and we will kind of move on from there. Healy, would you be kind enough to moderate the Q&A session, and we will move on from there.
Absolutely. Looks like one of our first questions is, what is the process and cost for translation to French?
To French. Okay. So a number of different pieces there. So we actually have been working on translation of our current standardized exams into Spanish. But as far as French goes, we have not. We do have. We worked with the province of New Brunswick a few years ago to translate the current standardized examinations into French. However, and we can administer those. However, we don't have a process. We don't have a we don't have these current examinations that are translated into French at the moment. We will be doing that with the with probably the province of New Brunswick again. However, if your program wishes to assist with that, we can certainly assist with the translation through that process. So the typically when you translated a certification exam, there's a whole process that you have to go through. It has to be translated into the other language, and then back into the origin language to ensure that everything is has crossed over correctly. But yes, there's a lot of interest in in different languages, Spanish being one, French being another. So we're very cognizant of that fact, and we will be certainly providing translated content as we move forward over the next year.
Great. Another question, perhaps Isabelle would be able to assist with this. It asks, if all exams are 100 questions, then wouldn't the raw and scaled score be the same?
So great question. So it's on the same scale. That being said, if you have, from a raw score standpoint, if the NGOF process is establishing that the standard leads to a cut score of 69, for instance, as an example, then the raw cut score is 69, but the scaled cut score is still 70. So everything is brought back to that related to that 70 scaled cut score. So that's the level. I would say that's probably one element of complexity. It's because like the scale seems to be the same because it's on the same scales from 0 to 100, but everything is scaled back to a cut of 70, regardless of what the raw cut score might be. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, Isabelle.
A question relating to the expected reading level for each of the items. Is there a specific reading level for all items aligned with something like the Flesch Kincaid readability or grade level? It might be helpful to communicate the expected reading level as well as math standards, it appears. Are they national standards? Are they other standards for math and science? Looks like there's just some questions related to the leveling there.
Certainly. Isabelle, would you mind? I mean, we follow PSI's guidance on as far as the psychometric development of the examinations and reading levels and complexity levels, that kind of thing. So, and perhaps Isabelle, you perhaps may be able to give a kind of an overarching. Overarching description of how vocational exams consume the reading levels.
Yeah. So typically the way it works from an exam development process is that we ensure that the language level is adequate and appropriate. And we typically are looking at kind of a grade 8 level is sort of the standard that's being applied across the board in general. However, that being said, as part of the process to develop and review questions, there's always an element around ensuring that the terms that are used are accessible and available, that we're not using specific terms that might be difficult to understand, whether it's for people that English as a second language or from another perspective. So throughout the process, targeting grade 8, but also ensuring that every question is being reviewed with that language level in mind, and making sure that the terms used are not complicated, because in the end, we're not assessing language, we're assessing the knowledge and abilities for the different types of examinations that we have in place here. I saw the question, just wanted to clarify as well. Someone was asking in terms of which standards are being used. So yes, so that from a grade standpoint, targeting grade 8, that in terms of the standards that Tom mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, the AERE and CME standards, these are assessment and measurement standards. So basically what they are is that they're defining the requirements and the standards required to develop a valid, reliable, and fair examination. And everything we do, everything WPI does, and how we work together is in alignment with those AERE and CME standards, which are best practice in assessment and measurement. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Isabelle. Appreciate that.
A question on the referencing. Are the CSUS references specifically, and Tom, I think you could speak to all of them, are they the new version or the old versions?
They're the new versions. So they all are aligned to the newest versions of the publications at the moment. So I think most of that's on the CSUS side, that's 8th edition at the moment. But the new WSO series and the WEF Fundamental series, we're using the most current reference materials that are available from those providers, yes.
When and how will people know when the new exam is being implemented? Will they hear from their testing administrator directly?
So not the testing administrator directly. So it is every program's responsibility to ensure their candidates understand what examinations are being administered in their jurisdiction. This is because obviously we've got multiple, we work with multiple clients and multiple member states and provinces that utilize our examinations in different ways. So they may utilize them, in an adverse way, class, A, B, C, D. They may utilize a subset of our examinations to fit their program. One in just as an example, the state of Ohio WPI utilizes, our class 2 exam as their class 1 exam. So that's it just depends on the discretion of the program. So we will do our very best to ensure that you have all, as a program and a certifying authority, you have all the resources available to you to ensure that your stakeholders understand which examinations you're administering in the jurisdiction, but that is the responsibility of the program themselves to ensure that your candidates understand what exam they're going to be taking.
Great, thanks, Tom. Someone would like a little more information on how the scaled score works. Will poor performing questions be dropped, or how will this work as the candidate is taking the test?
And I can take that. So there's a couple of things when you think about the performance of the questions. So there's a process in place where every single questions that appear on the examination as one of the 100 questions that are what we call operational questions, those questions have been tested, have been vetted, and they are performing to the level that is expected. How do we know that? It's because we have what we call pre-test items. So every exam has a set of pre-test items that don't count towards they are in addition to the 100 questions that count towards the score. So we're adding those pre-test questions to test them out, to ensure they perform to the level that they expected to perform. If they don't, then they're going to be removed, reworked. And if they do, then they're going to be made available to the pool of questions that can be selected to be on the examination. If, that being said, we always perform analyses on a regular basis on the performance of the questions on the examination. If, for some reason, some questions don't perform to the level expected from a psychometric standpoint, they will be flagged and reviewed. And then considered for removal for future versions or forms of the examination. So it's a really important aspect of the process is that first and foremost, all of the questions that appear on the examination and count towards the candidate's score have been pre-tested and vetted and are psychometrically sound from a performance standpoint. And if something happens and it's not the case, then it's going to be evaluated and flat.
Thank you, Isabelle. Appreciate that.
Tom, will the new score reports automatically have the scaled scores, or will there be multiple scores on the new score report? And does the jurisdiction have a choice to use the cut score or the scaled score?
So no, the jurisdiction does not have. We cannot offer any other scale or any other scoring than the scaled scoring, unfortunately, on these exams, because it is in line with a psychometric process. If we allow jurisdictions or primacy agencies to set a cut score on these examinations, it invalidates them essentially, because that cut score is arbitrary and hasn't been through the standard setting process. So the scaled score on all the new examinations will appear on the score reports given to candidates. So they will see you scored 70 or 75 scaled score units and you have passed the examination. There will be no it will be very clear whether or not they've passed the examination, and they'll have access to that scaled score and the performance matrices or indices that are in that bar graph. So that being said, so it is a single score that's provided to the candidate along with those performance indices, and then but anything else on the score report itself can be modified by the certifying authority language for candidates as to what to do next, that kind of thing. So through the implementation of these examinations, we will evaluate each of those pieces that are provided to candidates and to the program, and ensure that it matches your expectations.
Will it still be the same formula conversion tables?
Yes. The same formula conversion tables they've been through several updates over the last few years, but we've got ones that were reviewed this last year and stamped with a 2024 copyright. So those are the ones that are going to be administered with these examinations and with all of our current examinations as well. So we're working on ensuring that PSI has all of those pieces available to candidates when they take examinations. So, but I can tell you, anecdotally, there's very, very little changes to the formula conversion tables. They've been in the same iteration for a few years now. So, but minor changes, but still the same formula conversion tables that have been administered in the past. Yes.
Is a 70 still the passing score? And with that, will the exam change the number of questions, or will it always be 100? It appears that it's a little unclear how the raw score is different than the scaled score when there's 100 questions.
So the exam is 100 question, and really the key difference here, and what's really important to understand, and I'll give an example as well, is that we're not talking about a percentage. It's not 70%. It's a scaled score of 70. And so I'll give an example. So let's say, for instance, that the standard setting process led to a cut score of 66% or 66 correctly answered questions out of 100. So 66 is the standard, but we're scaling everything to 70. So you still need, from a raw perspective, you need to have 66 correct answers to pass the exam for that specific version of the exam, because that exam might be more difficult based on the combination of questions that have been provided. So that cut score that represents, again, the standard is set at 66. Everything is scaled to a cut of 70. What that means is that 65 would equate 68 or 69 as a scaled score. So everything is scaled to that cut of 70 on that scale of 0 to 99, basically. So, and I understand the confusion because in this situation, which is, you know, pretty rare in general, is the fact that we're talking about a scaled score scale that is aligned with the raw score. So that creates some confusion. But I think what's really critical to understand is that in the end, 70 is the scaled cut score, and that's what's going to be represented to the test taker. You need 70 scaled score units to be successful on the examination. Your scaled score is 68. It means that you didn't meet the standard. Your scaled score is 72. It means you met the standard and you're passing the exam. So everything is scaled according to that 70 cut.
Thank you, Isabelle.
Are the new
Yeah,
exams?
and another key component there is that candidates will never they'll never see the raw cut score on their exam.
Correct.
Right? So it's going to be reported only as a scaled score, and with the standard being 70 scaled score units. That is the passing mark for the examination.
Thanks, Tom. Are the new exams pre-tested or tested on test groups prior to being implemented?
So we utilize content that has a benchmark. Yes. So we've been utilizing content that has been pre-tested over the last 5-6 years. We've had this pre-test program in place since 2017, since we released our 2017 examinations, and we have moved through several different iterations of exam forms, essentially. So we had multiple exam forms that had different pre-test items on them, and we've been gathering this information over the last 5 to 7 years, and ensuring that all of the items that we put on these examinations meet a benchmark and a threshold. So yes, in that instance, yes, they absolutely are. So.
Given the discussion of raw versus scaled scoring, will testing candidates only see their final scores, or will they see multiple scores?
No, they will only see the final score. So if you look here on the score report, so it'll have a pass-fail indicator. It'll have the score of it, so that the score of XX here on this line will show that will show the scaled score achievement, essentially. So they will see that they scored 71 scaled score units and the passing score is 70. You've passed the examination. So they see one score, so it doesn't confuse anybody.
And Tom, is this scaled score essentially, in concept, the same idea as scoring on a curve? And therefore, is it the expectation that the scaled scores will increase or decrease the passing rates?
So it's not necessarily a curve, and I'll let Isabelle kind of make that the delineation between a curve and the scaled score. We had this discussion a couple of weeks ago at our conference, so you did an excellent job responding to that. So I'll let you take that one, and then I'll. And what was the second part of that question? I'm sorry.
What is the expectation? Increasing, decreasing, passing rates, or remaining the same?
The expectation is increasing because we are adhering to the actual cut score set through that process. We're not backing into a 70. So if you look at what we've done in the past, as Isabelle was alluding to earlier in her presentation, we have tried to build examinations to that 70% mark, right? That is what we've had to back into it, essentially. So we've had to select, pick and choose and select content that was going to eventually lead to a passing rate of 70%. which is because we had that arbitrarily defined, 70 cut score, right, by programs and in some cases legislation, that kind of thing. This allows us to be adherent to the process and be more true to the cut score study process, and ensure that we have that competence marker is accurately represented in the exam development process. So the expectation is, yes, the passing scores will go up, but that's, of course, that's dependent on a lot of different features. But we know that from our standpoint, from an exam development standpoint, from a psychometric standpoint, it is in line with best practices, and we are, providing the test administration and the test content in the best way that we can, the most appropriate way we can. So, Isabelle, could you speak to the scaled score and grading on a curve and the delineation there?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I can also tackle a little bit of that pass rate as well, because it links together in a way. So the answer to the question is that is it like the equivalent of scoring on a curve? The answer to that is no. The main difference is that when you there's two different methodologies. There's criterion reference and norm reference. The curve is what we call norm reference. So it's basically expecting that you have a certain number of people that will succeed, and you based everything based on that norm, and you're setting that cut from that perspective. From a criterion reference, it's back to that concept of minimal competence. You're defining what the criteria is, what is expected to perform at that minimal level of competence, and everyone that meets that requirement will get a passing result. So regardless of, if you think about it, regardless of who's there in the cohort, if people are meeting that criterion, they're going to be successful. If they're not meeting that criterion, they're not going to be successful. So that could lead to fluctuation in pass rate. But in the end, what is really critical to remember is that it's not about who's taking the exam at what point in time and the level of difficulty of the exam. It's establishing what is that requirement of competence and who meets it. So, for example, if you happen to be part of a cohort of test takers during a period of time that just happens to be all superstars, well, they're going to pass the exam because they meet that minimal level of competence. So that might be that the pass rate for a period is higher just because the cohort of people is stronger. So if from a norm reference standpoint, you would want to see a certain number of people passing or failing. In this situation here, it doesn't matter. If they meet the criteria, they're going to pass the examination. If again, the other example that I have is that if you create different forms of the examination, and it happens that the level of difficulty of the examination is different. So a cohort, for whatever reason, gets a slightly easier exam by nature of the combination of the questions. They don't have more chances of passing because the score is equivalent. We're making everything on the same scale based on the standard. So it's not like you have more chances of passing with an easier exam, or you have less chances of passing with a harder exam, because everything is scaled to that standard. That's what is the principle of the criterion reference, is that it's all about the standard. It doesn't matter who's part of the cohort. It doesn't matter the level of difficulty. Everything is scaled to that criteria. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, Isabelle. There was a question on if there will be information explained on the WPI website for those who want to know. Abby did respond to that. There will be a blog post going up today or tomorrow on Immerse WPI's blog with information on scaled scoring. So that's definitely something that you will be able to share with candidates if your program implements and you decide to send them that information. Another question, will candidates know what the passing scaled score will be? Will it be updated? And then along those same lines, will the certifying authority be able to see the raw score?
The candidate will understand the cut score. So if we just take a look at this score report, once again, they will understand that the passing score is 70 scaled score units. They're not going to see the raw score. They're not going to see, they will see the passing score or the standard as 70, and they will see how many points or how many scaled score units they achieved on the examination. So it will be very clear for candidates when they receive their score reports. As far as programs receiving the or not test administrators, but certifying authorities receiving the raw score, that's something we can discuss on an individual level. But from our standpoint, no, we're not. It's not information that we're currently providing, but we can discuss that if there's a need. So.
Will the scaled scoring only apply to the new standardized exams?
Yes. These are the only exams that have been developed in this manner, and the scaled scoring is a new initiative for these examinations. So it is, again, being implemented with these exams. It will not be retroactively applied to older examinations because they were built in a different way. You know, we were true to the standard setting process in this iteration of standardized exams, and I anticipate this continuing in the future. It is best practice as you know, as a content provider for high stakes vocational examinations, best practice in the psychometrics industry. So it is something that will be will remain in effect as we move forward with new examinations.
Will there be multiple versions of these exams?
That's a great question. Yes, we will. We are in. We constantly are developing certification exams, so it's an ongoing process. It just doesn't happen, like I said, in a vacuum once every 5 years. It takes a good 3 or 4 years to develop fully develop certification exams, from a job analysis up to you know, up to the exams that are released right now. That being said, we are constantly looking at you know, the data that we're, you know, and analyzing the data that we're getting from candidates sitting for these examinations in real world scenarios. So that gives us, you know, a good indication of exam performance, and also allows us to collect data on those pretest items which do support new exam forms. So the nice thing about the scaled scoring is we can release different forms that may go through a different, or may, as Isabelle alluded to in her presentation, was that we can release multiple forms, and they may have a different standard set on them because of the combination of questions. But it allows us to normalize that essentially and report that on the same. So one candidate taking a slightly more difficult form is not going to get penalized. You know, if somebody else is taking it, it's fair across that equating process, right? So
It appears there's a few questions just relating to if WPI will provide explanations or tutorials for applicants, candidates, employers, and trainers. We will be doing our best to share information to aid in the transition and provide documents that the certifying authorities can share out with their individual candidates or applicants, trainers, employers, things like that. So we will be doing our best to share information, and we, of course, are willing to answer questions as well.
and I'm always available to answer any kind of member program inquiries about this implementation. If you have specific inquiries about how we can implement in your jurisdiction, or what that would look like, or you have you need if you need more information to provide to stakeholders or decision makers or leadership or whatever have you, we can assist with facilitating those conversations as well. So please reach out to myself or to my staff, and we'll ensure that you have everything you need.
And again, it's important to note that this is only on the new standardized exams, as Tom mentioned. So many jurisdictions won't be transitioning to this immediately. So there is time for plenty of outreach and answers of questions, things like that. Another question we have is, how does the scaled score work when the cut score for a 100 question exam is higher than 70%? Will people who score higher than the cut score receive a higher mark than the number of questions that they answered correctly?
The answer to
Isabelle,
that,
yeah.
the answer to that is yes, because as mentioned earlier, everything is scaled to the cut. So, well, I guess the answer is not yes. So I'll take that example. So the example, let's say you need 75%, 75 raw score, 75% to pass the exam because it's an easier exam. Everything's going to be scaled to 70. So if you get, if someone gets 80, it's going to be scaled to align with that scaled score of 70. So that might represent 75 scaled scored units. So everything is scaled up or down depending on what the raw cut score is. So a higher raw cut score will lead to scaling down to that 70. So that means all of the scores are scaled down to represent that same kind of level in terms of how far were you from the cut score. And alternatively, is if it's lower, everything's going to be scaled up to reflect that cut of 70. So what's really critical here is that the representation of the scaled score that the test taker will see, the score they got, will be relative to that 70 cut. So were they close, were they far, it's still going to be represented.
Thank you, Isabelle.
When compared to the existing exams, can we assume all of the questions on the updated exams are new?
Not necessarily. We did use some of the. It just depends on which examination it is. There was some use of older content that has, that was performing well on older examinations. So it is a mix of new content and content that has, that has been utilized in the past. But they, the content itself is aligned to the blueprint, those exam blueprints that were developed by the job analysis. So there were certainly some new tasks and new processes that were detailed through that job analysis process and the exam development process. So those are represented on these examinations, certainly. So, but it's a combination of content that has been used before and content that's been pre-tested. So.
And some of that content that's been used before, Tom, would that feel familiar from maybe some of those pre-test items that weren't necessarily graded on prior exams but did appear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the case with many, I mean, with all of our examinations, because we do have the pretest program in place. And to give you some context, we utilize, like, for every form that we're administering, there's probably 7 or 8 different pretest sets out there. So 70 or 80 items per exam that we're collecting information on. So lots of but again, those are pretest items that don't count towards candidate scores, but we have to, and they can't be called out on for candidates because they have to be answered with the same care and consideration that they would a scored item. So that allows us, and they have to be obviously administered in a certification environment for somebody who is actually seeking certification. So we're getting good information on how those items are going to be performing on future examinations, but they're not they don't affect a candidate score on the current exams. So yes, there's those pretest items are critical to the exam development process and ensuring that we don't have to, we don't have to go back and do a delayed scoring situation that we had to do in 2017, where candidates had to wait for 6 months to receive scores. So. That is the whole goal of the pretest program, is to ensure that we've got items that have valid statistics behind them and can be placed on certification exams.
Will there be new practice exams?
Yes, practice exams. That's a fantastic, fantastic point. We are, in fact, working on developing and on developing a number of different resources for the practice exam side of things. We have developed class 1 and 2 practice exams across all 4 disciplines, and these are long forms examinations. So what that means is they're aligned to the exam blueprints. But they also give candidates an explanation of why the question is, or why the correct answer is the correct answer, and why the distractors are not the correct answer. So it gives them, once they go through and answer the items, it gives them that explanation. So they have they have the opportunity to learn about that process through the practice exam process. Now we have developed those. Those have not been published yet, but we also excitingly just signed or just entered into an agreement with PSI for their for utilizing their new AI generation tool for practice exam development. And of course, this not ChatGPT or anything like that. And perhaps Isabelle, you might be able to speak. You spoke extensively at this at our conference. But perhaps you could give us a quick highlight of what that process looks like, or how that helps support the development of practice exams.
Yeah, absolutely. So leveraging AI is we have an AI tool that's called Memorang that we're leveraging and we're making available to our partners, the clients we work with, to assist in the generation of more content, leveraging generative AI tool that is obviously all part, all the guardrails associated with that. So our approach is to being able to leverage that AI generation tool, then have still a review process in place to make sure that everything meets the requirements and all that. But the goal is twofold. One is that looking at generating more content that would be made available for practice exams, for instance. And then we also have a tool, an app that host those practice exams that will be able to be more interactive in terms of like getting the sample questions, the practice exam questions, providing rationales, identifying the performance, the level of performance, and so on and so forth. So a more interactive way of identifying the level, the readiness level, if so to speak. So we are working right now with WPI to identify the next steps related to that, to be able to put practice exams on that application. So, and then being able to generate more content to provide to test takers.
Absolutely. It's really exciting too. The Memorang product it's a fantastic product, and the nice thing about it is we can define all those parameters, right? And it's done in a silo, right? So we're not drawing information from just the internet at large. We're very prescriptive. We'll be very prescriptive about how the examinations are built, practice examinations are built utilizing AI, ensure that they are in alignment with our exam blueprints, but it's a great way to get content generation for exam preparation efforts, right?
And AWWA and WEF are still very close partners, CSUS. They're all aware of changes that have, taken place on the new need to know in those content outlines. So I imagine that they will be doing implementation and updates and things like that as well as time goes on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we're working very closely with those providers to ensure that our content is aligned with their content as well. We have cooperative agreements with all 3 of those organizations, and we work very closely with them to ensure that what we're producing is in line with their production of their publications as well. So.
Tom, on that note, do you have an idea of the percentage of the need to know that is completely new content compared to the old one?
I don't have that off the top of my head, and I don't want to make I don't want to make assumptions at this juncture. I mean, I can get the information definitely, but I don't have that off the top of my head. But I do know that there was there was a significant amount of conversation, especially when we were distilling all of the information from the job analysis, you know, and identifying changes to the content outlines. Yes, there are tasks and pieces that have that were added to the content outline, and there were things that dropped off just because they were not represented as heavily on the job analysis survey. So that is, I don't have that off the top of my head, but anecdotally, I mean, the exams still are going to you know, they're still going to align to the same processes and treatment processes and all of those pieces they did before. But as far as like brand new content, there is some, but I'm not going to. It definitely wasn't a complete revamp of everything. I mean, the job analysis did, you know, confirm a lot of the other pieces that were on the older standardized examinations, and it added some as well. But as far as, you know, treatment processes and that kind of thing go, it probably didn't change a whole lot, but there are definitely tasks on the new need to know criteria that were not on the old one.
Where will the practice exam and practice content be housed?
So it will be housed with PSI. So PSI will be our administrator for those examinations. So and since everybody, I don't know how the process works with publishing those examinations through their store, but it's likely that we can link to you know, on the candidate landing page that candidates go to take examinations through their program. We can probably link to you know, the practice exams or where to find the practice exams on that platform. But how does the platform work, Isabelle? Is that something that you can expand on?
Yeah, from an app standpoint, this is going to be, people will be able to download the app and being able to go and search for the examination. Information will be provided how to get to it, how to access it once it's made available on the application. But what Tom mentioned is that the current process, that it's all part of the platform that we have currently in place for the practice exams, and we're looking at evolving that and making that available through the app. So people will be able to have their phone, go on the app, take the practice exams on the app, and make it a little bit more interactive and engaging. That's the future that we're working towards.
Fantastic. Thank you, Isabelle.
And if you're curious, maybe I can add, if you're ever curious, the WPI exams are not yet there, practice exams, but it's called the PSI Test Prep app. So if you go to the App Store, you know, you look at it, you could actually view there's a number of free practice exams for other types of examinations. We have a lot of licensure exams, real estate, insurance, construction. So if you want to get a sense of what this looks like, you can actually try it for free and then see what that could look like. And stay tuned for more on the WPI practice tests.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, we have a question on advanced water treatment. It appears that there are lots of jurisdictions pursuing that advanced water treatment approaches to support IPR and DPR plant operations. How might the 2025 treatment operator exams for water and wastewater reflect such marketplace advances?
Well, the examinations that we have developed are in line with the job task analysis survey that we did. There are certainly other facets of the industry that you know, that are, you know, up and coming. Essentially, the advanced treatment processes is something that we're keeping a weather eye on. But it's, you know, that's something the Certification Commission for Environmental Professionals has to you know, has to consume and have, you know, a lot of input in to, you know, if we're going to target those that particular demographic of the industry, the particular side of the industry. So it's not something that I would imagine that currently on the 2025 treatment examinations, we're, you know, not looking at those advanced properties. We're looking at defining the minimum competence for each of the levels that we produce. So it's very possible we could be working with something in the advanced treatment side of things, but it may be a separate project from what we're providing in the standardized examinations.
And I think it's important to note that we are using those 20,000 responses that we received from people all over North America and the world to determine what is on our exams and what is necessary. And at this time, this is going to be the most relevant exam for a wide variety of jurisdictions.
Yes.
Let's see. We have a question on, do we develop the exam based on technical manuals, and how many questions are required as a minimum?
Technical manuals. I mean, technical manuals are utilized in the development of our items. So every question that we have, every item that we have is referenced by, to a manual and all the way down to the page and paragraph that the information is taken from. So our exam development committees, our scheme committees, have discretion on which manuals they utilize for each of their disciplines, but within a certain framework, right? We say these are the manuals you can utilize, and they get to pick and choose which ones they utilize. I know the collection side of things, they lean heavily on the CSUS books. Water treatment side of things, they lean heavily on the AWWA WSO series. So the number of questions in each of the content areas is defined by the job analysis survey, and those can be found in the need to know criteria.
Isabelle, could you go into a little more detail on the Angoff method and exactly where those numbers come from?
Yes, absolutely. So the way it works is that you have a panel of subject matter experts or judges. So let's say typically we have like 10 to 12 subject matter experts that would be part of the process. And then they will, each of them, let's say we have 12 judges, each of them will go through the exam questions and identify what's the percentage of minimally competent that will get the question correct. So those numbers come from each of those individual judges. So let's say judge 1 says for question number 1 says 70%. Does judge 2 for question number 1 says 75%, so on and so forth. They all provide a value. Then this is averaged for each of the item. What is that proportion of minimally competent test takers that will get the question correct? That becomes the Angoff value for that question, and then so on and so forth for all of the 100 questions on the test. So the values are coming from the judgments from those subject matter experts. As I've indicated in the presentation, there's a process of reviewing those if there's a lot of fluctuations where the subject matter experts don't necessarily agree with the level of difficulty. So that's why it's called, we call it a modified Angoff process, is that there's an opportunity for a round 2 where you update, the judges will update potentially their ratings based on the discussion they've had that relates back to the definition of the minimally competence and also kind of the discussions with the other judges, because they might have seen something about the question that others haven't, and that's how they provided a certain rating. So the idea in the end, short answer, is that it's the average of the ratings that are provided by each of the judges for each of the question, and the final cut score is the average of all of those ratings that will determine what is the cut, because then that represents the minimal standard.
Perfect. Thank you, Isabelle.
If a jurisdiction has one version of the new exam, is the scaled score just adjusting the cut score to a 70-based passage rate?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question? I apologize.
Yeah, it says if a jurisdiction has one version of the new exam, is the scaled score just adjusting the cut score to a 70-based passage rate?
Essentially, yes.
I believe it's asking more like if there's only the 70 scaled score is not relevant to how many exams a jurisdiction has. Each exam is going to be set using a scaled score that's appropriate with a 70 as the passing score.
70 scaled score units, yes.
Are practice exams going to be program or state specific?
I'm sorry, are they going to be, are the exams program?
Are practice exams going to be program or state specific?
They are not. They are going to be, in aligned, an alignment, excuse me, if I could speak, in alignment with our standardized exam blueprints. So they'll follow the same for a class 1 water treatment examination. They'll follow the same blueprint that we utilize to develop the actual certification exam, the vocational exam. So they're going to be non-jurisdictional. They're going to speak to the processes that are detailed on, they're going to detail the processes that are outlined on an NTK, the need to know criteria, but they're not going to be specific for states themselves. Now, if there is or different jurisdictions, now if there's a need for it, or we want to explore, developing practice exams for specific jurisdictions that are utilized only within that jurisdiction, we can certainly look at that. But it's not something that we're pursuing at the moment. We're just working on building working on building the practice exams that are reflective of the current standardized examinations.
Thanks, Tom. We have an individual wondering about the overlap between the new and old exams and the need to know criteria as well as the practice exams. Is there a need for an old and a new version of these? And when will the new need to know criteria and practice exams be available?
So the new need to know criteria is available currently. We will ensure that everybody on this this call today, or this webinar today, has access to those. The practice examinations themselves are still an initiative that we're working towards, so that those will be released in the coming months, but not something that we have access to at the moment. We are working towards that, but these examinations are, completely, the brand new examinations are completely released. They're ready for review and implementation. The need to know criteria is fully published. We'll ensure that everybody on this call gets access to that, and it can be shared out to stakeholders and training providers and all of those pieces as well. So there is a need to make a distinction between the old examinations and new examinations because of because of how they're being utilized by our clients. We're going to be very careful about ensuring that that when we implement a program, that they have all of the information on these new examinations, they have all the information for their stakeholders. So because they are different, because they have different, these examinations have different resources associated with them, we don't want candidates to cross those two paths. So if a jurisdiction is not going to administer these examinations, say until the beginning of next year, to give them time to to roll them out with their stakeholders and all of those pieces. We want to ensure that all of the programs and the candidates coming to our website to get these resources are identifying the correct ones. So that's why the firewall at the moment. But as we get towards more programs implementing these examinations on across the board, then we will ensure those resources are available to your candidates and your program.
Does the new job analysis include regulations as a domain of knowledge?
They do not. So just like the current standardized examinations, there's no regulatory content on it, either at a state or a provincial level or even at a federal level, because the examinations are utilized across multiple jurisdictions across both the United States and Canada, and all over the world, essentially. And regulations that are dictated by one particular authority, whether it be US EPA or even at a state level or even at a utility level, they can differ they can differ wildly across those jurisdictions. So we don't include regulatory content on our examinations. Our examinations speak to process and the tasks and the jobs that operators are doing on a day-to-day basis, and not necessarily the regulations themselves. Regulations are they are not necessarily, they're not unimportant, they're very important, right? We want to ensure that that our certification exams can be reactive to those changes and that kind of thing. So at a state level, or at a provincial level, or at a program level, it is important for those regulations to be included in your continuing education programs and all of those pieces. So operators and candidates have repeated exposure to all of those important regulations that they have to adhere to in their jurisdiction. The certification exam is not the appropriate medium for that. So, in that instance, no, we are not. We do not include regulations on our certification exams, just like we have not in the past.
Will the web-based exam URLs change?
They will change, yes. So the web-based examinations are accessed through a static URL. If you implement these examinations with through that modality, you will receive new static URLs for each of these examinations because they're configured differently. They've got different content on it, right? So you will definitely receive new static links for that, and that's coordinated by our staff here at WPI. Emily does a very nice job ensuring that all of those confidential proctor pieces are disseminated to all of your programs, testing facilities, that kind of thing.
It appears there's a question about updated formula conversion tables. Again, those are not being updated at this time. If there is information on there that you feel is missing, feel free to send us an email and we will discuss with our commissioner in that area to determine if additional changes are needed on those formula conversion tables, if there's a missing formula, or if it's a formula that you get in a different way. So if you have questions related to that, feel free to send us an email and we can discuss that with our commissioner for that discipline.
Absolutely. Yeah, we receive feedback on formula conversion tables all the time, and all of that is reviewed and put into the review process for those formula conversion tables. So. Any other questions, Healy?
It appears that we have covered in some capacity all the questions that we currently have. If we want to give people another minute to submit any other final questions.
Sure. Yeah, and I will definitely say that if you have additional questions that come up as you discuss this and discuss the new examinations with your stakeholders and your leadership teams, that kind of thing. If questions come up, or if you need us to come speak to a committee or anything like that, we can certainly do that. Happy to make ourselves available to our members and our stakeholders to ensure that you have all the information you need. Like I said, if you want to review the examinations as a certifying authority, please follow that SurveyMonkey link. Again, that will allow you to indicate your intentions of whether you want to review the exams and implement them, or whatever have you. So that's a key component there to ensure that we have the right information to effectively assist your program.
We did have a few more questions come in. Another concern about scaled scoring versus raw scoring being problematic for trainers. Again, we will provide documentation and work with the jurisdictions and trainers at large to get content out to them that is relevant to help them explain how these exams are scored, but it does primarily impact those who are taking the exam. But even more than that, really the regulators and the jurisdiction on the back end is who's going to see the biggest change. Are need to knows available for industrial wastewater treatment exams?
So we have not updated those examinations in some time. So they, in fact, the one of exercise that they're not part of the standardized exam program that we administer. So that the standardized exam program does include water treatment, wastewater collection, and water distribution. Those are the 4 core disciplines in which that we release these examinations on a particular cadence. We do have other programs that that are older programs that we have administered for several years. Industrial waste being one of them, biological waste, the laboratory for water and wastewater lab, that kind of thing. We've got a lot of different programs that are not included in that standardized exam, under that standardized exam umbrella. So those are not updated at the same cadence that we do all of our other examinations. Now, that being said, the new Certification Commission for Environmental Professionals, or C2EP, will be looking at the viability of all of those programs in the coming year, and making determinations on whether or not it's a viable program to update. So no, at the moment, there are no new need to know criteria for that particular discipline for industrial waste, but again, something may be coming depending on the exams, or depending on C2EP's review of the programs.
Are we looking to move to adaptive testing in the future?
Adaptive testing. Something that we have considered, but not something that we have access to at the moment. I don't know, Isabelle, is there something that you can speak to on adaptive testing? I'm not very versed in it, but we just don't have we don't have enough content for adaptive testing at the moment. My understanding is it takes a lot of underlying content in order to build that out. Is that something? Am I correct in that?
You are correct. It requires a lot of content, that has been pre-tested and has psychometric values. There's a number of elements that need to be considered for adaptive testing. There's various considerations around it as well in general, in terms of what that looks like, how to explain it to test takers. But at the moment, there's limitations in the ability to do that specifically for those exams.
So always something we're looking towards and looking at. Again, this is we're implementing skilled scoring, which is an industry best practice for high stakes vocational examinations, and frankly, all standardized examinations. It's a process that is utilized across the industry. So excited to make that step into best practices. And as we move forward and the technology improves, and we're gaining more and more content, it's very possible it may be something that we can implement in the future, but at the moment, it is not something that's reachable for WPI and what we've got at the moment. So.
And then, Tom, one final question before you can wrap up here. Mm-hmm. Is there a plan for the small system exams and updates there?
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you asked that. We, in fact, are we are contracted to redevelop the small systems examinations, so small wastewater systems, and very small water system examinations, so that those exams will follow the same exam development process that we utilize on the standardized exams for the 4 core disciplines. We will perform an international job analysis of those particular disciplines, and be working on developing those examinations in the next year. So that is, as you can see, as I mentioned before, it is an ongoing process, and we don't just work in the standardized 4 core side of things. That we are working towards supporting the small systems as well, because frankly, the 80% of the systems in North America are small systems. So we definitely want to ensure that demographic is accurately represented in the offerings the association has. So exciting work that we're working towards, and I'm very glad that everybody was able to attend today's webinar. And again, we will follow up with all of the resources promised in here, and you'll have access to this recording so it can be shared with your stakeholders and your leadership groups. So I do want to thank everybody for attending today. I would like to extend a special thanks to Isabelle for providing her expertise and her support of our program. She has been just a fantastic ally and a fantastic resource in our exam development processes, and I lean on her very heavily. So thank you, Isabelle, for your assistance and your expertise today. It's very well received. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And with that, I think we can wrap up. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or the team here, Healy, or anybody on my team. We're happy to assist or happy to answer questions. Happy to jump on a call to discuss any concerns or any unanswered questions that we weren't able to address here. So thank you all for attending. I look forward to hearing from you and implementing these new examinations and providing the resources that you folks need to administer your program. So thank you very much.